sky. Snow and blood and ashes and dreams too strong to die.
Let's go ahead and get started. This is Gnostic Warrior Radio. This will be the first episode. I'm your host, Mo Bedard, broadcasting from Southern California, San Diego County, a city called Carlsbad. And on the other end of the Skype phone here, we have Miguel Connor from Chicago, Gnostic, Irish Catholic radio host, an author with 4 books. Correct, Miguel?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Voices of Gnosticism, which I have here in my hands, and some other books called Stargazer, Heretic, and The Executioner's Daughter. And you have the 2 websites, theabovegod.com and the website where you host your radio episodes, aeonbytgnosticradio.com, and that's AEONBYTE, gnosticradio.com.
It's actually thegodabovegod.com.
Okay, gotcha. I got that here, so thank you for correcting me.
No problem.
And how old are you, Miguel, if you don't mind I ask?
I'm a whopping 44 years old in this monkey suit.
Wow. No, the reason I asked is because I feel like somewhat of a connection with you, even though this is the first time that we're speaking with one another. You know how the internet is, where we could get to know people even before we meet them by what they say, on their websites and interviews and, of course, in their books. So it's kind of cool. So I felt a connection. Then I, of course, saw pictures of you, and you look kind of the similar age to me. I'm 41 years old.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, and I enjoy your shows. I'm actually new to the Gnostic scene, and, I've been studying various websites, and I've gotten various books and so forth. But as far as people that are out there that have interviewed a lot of people, I feel in this industry, if you want to call it, as far as in this field of Gnosticism, which is an ancient field, I feel you're one of the best out there.
Oh, thank you.
Doing this. You're welcome, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And you've been doing a lot of work out there that I feel is not being as noticed as it should, even though you are, one of the leaders in this field. And you got a tremendous circle of influence, obviously, with all the people that you've had on the radio show. Who are some of the people that you've had on your show?
Well, I've definitely been honored of having some of the great scholars and thinkers on religion and the occult in our times. Some of my guests have included Bart Ehrman, Elaine Pagels, Gary Lachman, John Turner, Karen King, and a whole slew of them. Just a lot of great scholars, again, thinkers who really shape our modern esoterica.
I agree, Miguel. I mean, some of those people are new to me, but they are people that I'm finding everywhere. And then when you look on Amazon and you're looking for books,
right,
it's all those people you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And they're scholars in their field, and a lot of them have like different niches in Gnosticism. Would you agree, Miguel?
Oh, I would say so, because the field is going to get very specialized. Some focus more on Coptic, more on early Gnosticism. Some, like recently had David Eisenman, focuses exclusively on the Dead Sea Scrolls and so forth. Some on Paul. So it's a lot broader field than most would think.
Why do you think certain people are attracted to certain types of Gnosticism or certain backgrounds? Because that's what I'm finding myself, and I see that in you as well.
Well, I think first we probably need to find out what Gnosticism is and go from there. Because, for example, there is Arthur Versluis, and he comes from more of an esoteric background. Then you have somebody like Eric Wilson, probably the leading scholar on William Blake in the world, and he focuses more on the literature, artistic side of Gnosticism. So
okay, yeah, let's start with that then. How would you, one of my first questions would be, how do you define Gnosticism? But I want to break that up actually into two questions, because you just brought it up actually with esoteric Gnosticism. How would you define esoteric Gnosticism?
Well, Well, it basically focuses more on not the historical existence of the Gnostics, but more on these ideas that impact our culture and, of course, the more heterodox parts of our culture. That's how I define Gnosticism. For example, again, Arthur Verse-Louis he focuses more on how the ideas of certain Gnostics might influence or possibly could give us alternative politics. So that would be a focus of the esoteric side of Gnosticism, of course, how it influenced secret societies, a lot of artists today, or the thoughts of Carl Jung. So again, it just kind of goes away from the historical side of Gnosticism, and again puts it more of in a cultural context, because the Gnostics have always influenced thinkers throughout history, whether it's Voltaire or someone like Carl Jung or William Burroughs and so forth. The Gnostics were sort of an inspiration, as some have said, for the French Revolution, for the Enlightenment, for the Freemasons, and so forth. So that would be the esoteric side of Gnosticism.
Would you say the Freemasonry is based on Gnosticism?
That's a good question. That's a very debated question. The Freemasons, as they became mature and more of an esoteric movement, certainly were inspired and knew of the Gnostics in various incarnations. I always like to say that the Gnostics are the secret society of secret societies, because somewhere underneath you will find that certain members or movements are very Gnostic-minded, or are simply inspired by the Gnostics and how they were this great threat to the orthodox powers, this romantic view that they were the small egalitarian few who stood up to a coalescing religion and an empire and were crushed. And throughout history, they've been basically squashed by this power and that power when they're going around offering alternative views on how to live life and how to look at existence. So historically, it would be very hard to pinpoint a connection with Freemasons and the Gnostics. But there was a writer named, or there was a professor, scholar named Jan Culiano. And he wrote a book called The Tree of Gnosis. And what he said is, because history has been written by the victors, or because we just don't have that much material on the Gnostics, the best way is try to pinpoint the Gnostic thought. How did it appear here with the Cathars, and then how did it move there with the Kabbalah, and sort of create a map from that. That's probably a better way. And eventually he simply said, look, maybe that's how the human mind or spirit is. When it's like a binary code. When you have a time when the thought is very orthodox, very ordered, very conformist or collective, the human mind immediately is going to switch in some people, and the Gnostic ideas will sort of appear. And this sort of switch binary code will always go around. It's almost like if suddenly the Bible and the Quran and all the religions disappeared, and 100 years later somebody thought of a religion, automatically there'd be one side who said we need to do it this way, and automatically another side would appear, well, why don't we try the Gnostic way? So that's that way to do it.
Yeah, and when I first asked you the question, you had mentioned like the two opposing sides, and when I look back over history and you look back at Christianity and then the Gnosticism and the Gnostics back then, and then you look at the forming of the Catholic Church, it was almost like the Gnostics that formed the Catholic Church, which I believe is an esoteric form of Christianity concealed with various pagan rites and so forth. We can maybe get to that later, but there were the victors, possibly now, who knows, but they were a group of Gnostics that essentially decided they were going to do it their way, and it was, us against them kind of thing. Do you agree?
Yeah, well, you have to really see how Christianity started. There was never really, you might say, the first 2nd century, 1st century, there was never really any such thing as orthodoxy and Gnosticism. These groups were all trying to figure out what was going on. They were speculating on Jesus. They were having visions. They were trying to figure out what their roots were and what they were going to borrow from other cultures. And you had this great stew of different, you might say, Christianities. And I think Professor David Brackey, he called it hybridity, which is basically all religions sort of, you might say, borrow or grow within each other. And these Christians had disagreements, but some, as some scholars have pointed out, the Orthodox had very Gnostic ideas. For example, that the world was ruled in layers by different entities, or some of the church fathers like Clement of Alexandria and Origen believed that there was a concept of knowledge, of gnosis, of divine knowledge, where knowledge could lead us to faith or salvation or enlightenment. And at the same time, a lot of the so-called Gnostics had ideas that were very orthodox. They could be pretty, at times they could be very intolerant. But the point is that these groups at first really saw themselves all as Christian or followers of Christ. The designation of Gnostic and Orthodox didn't really come about till much later in history.
And Christ, define Christ as in your mind as a Gnostic.
Oh, well, that's I always take a pretty radical approach.
I love radical.
To me, I see Christ as sort of the you might say the logos of the Stoics, or the logos of the Gospel of John. He's the reason of the divine. He's the moving force of the divine that is creating and figuring things out. I don't, from my standpoint, I don't see much of evidence to say there was even a historical figure, but I like the concept that scholars or more radical scholars have seen on Paul, where it's this sort of mythical being that's beyond reality, and through his mysteries and teachings, we can ignite and awaken our own divine spark to the reality and to the reality of our own divinity. So that's a short way of how I see Christ.
So that, I mean, basically that would be like an allegorical Christ representing the Logos, which each one of us could possibly attain if we live as Christ did. And you had mentioned something before in another podcast about the ancient Gnostics mentioning, being crucified and resurrected again. That's not just for Jesus, but for all of us.
Exactly. I think when you look at certain texts like the Gospel of Philip, it says basically, you need to be resurrected in this lifetime. You will, if you witness if you witness Christ or see this energy, this logos beyond reality, beyond mundane consciousness, you yourself can become a Christ in this world. I think Robert Price said it very well. He said that the Gnostics saw themselves basically as Christian bodhisattvas. They were transformed in this world, and they wanted to help others find the way to become transformed. The Gnostics were very in their texts when they use the term death, they're really talking about where we are now. They're almost agnostic. Gnostic when it comes to death and reincarnation and the afterlife. They sort of play with it, and they tack it on to their works. But their thrust was, this is the life. This is where you need to become Christ, because reincarnation is not good. The afterlife is not good. This is it. And when you're there, then figure it out.
Yeah, and the goal, of course, in this life is to be Christ-like, to ascend, as opposed to keep reincarnating and having to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. You're to perfect thyself.
Exactly. I mean, and I think Buddhism, who some have said is certain forms of Buddhism are very close to Gnosticism, would say yes, reincarnation is not a good thing as we think of, as we've come to believe in the West. This eternal forgetfulness where we forget everything and we're desperately going through lives trying to recall this wonderful thing, it's not a good thing. We have to get it right here in the now. The Gnostics had a sense of urgency, which I admire, which other religions I see sometimes lacking. They always said, look, everything's going to be okay. Trust, do what you got to do, help others, but you need to have a sense of urgency, because before the clock runs out, the worst thing you want to do is go to the other side without this great knowledge.
Yeah, and when I look at sometimes organized religion, it's almost like they knew what was going on at the time, and maybe the problem that they had in imperialism or whatever they were doing was that this knowledge was out there, and in order to conquer the world, they had to bottle it up and and say it in stories and allegories, and they said it in the Bible, but where people couldn't really understand, so they did the thinking for everybody else.
Yeah, that's what that really usually happens with a lot of religions when they start. They have a more of a I don't want to say mystic quality, because I feel any religion still really tries to be mystic, and many religions, whether it doesn't matter if it's Orthodox Islam or evangelicals, they really want to have knowledge of God. I think that sincerely they want to know what's outside of this world. But it starts with a more I would say intense look at the world, like you said, more allegorizing, where certain entities are more like mythological constructs which help us build our inner world or discover our inner world. And later it has to be obviously repackaged for the masses, and a lot of it has to be lost. And again, some things gained where you get a lot of followers, some things lost where you lose that inner intensity and those inner secrets. It's really normal for religions to do that. Buddhism went through it, Christianity went through it, and so forth.
Yeah, and I see now that I'm learning more about Gnosticism and becoming more educated in knowledge, and of course the past history of religion, I'm actually enjoying religion and Christianity more. I'm also a fellow Catholic myself. I wouldn't consider myself a every Sunday going hardcore Catholic, but I come from that background, and I enjoy it a little bit more that I understand the allegories and I could read behind the words, because it is a Gnostic religion, whatever way you look at it. Do you feel Christianity is a Gnostic religion?
I wouldn't say it's a Gnostic religion. Again, I do believe that all religions sincerely would like to know what's outside there, would like to expand their consciousness and have contact with higher entities and have an awakening, if you would. But the Gnostics themselves would take a different approach to the world. Obviously, one of their big ones is where are we now? Christianity and the larger religions would say, well, we have the world is the way it's created right now and everything's great. The Gnostics took a turn and said, no, this world is it's not even an illusion. It's a virtual reality prison, and we have these lower forms of divinity who are suppressing our own divine identity, or as they call it, the divine spark, that shard of infinity within each one of us, and at the same time they are feeding from us. And of course, when people, they go, well, that sounds like the Matrix, I say, yeah, go watch the Matrix or Dark City or the Truman Show, and you'll pretty much get the gist of Gnosticism. So that's where they would break away. Although, having said that, that is not necessarily, like they say, a really negative thing. Certain groups of Gnostics and certainly the Hermetics and softer forms of Kabbalah said, yes, we are here where we don't belong, and this universe is a bad construct of a higher universe. But that's not wrong, because after all, maybe divinity is just simply working things out like we're working things out. It's a parallel process. Maybe part of divinity came into this world and it's okay, and this world is not so bad, and it simply needs to awaken. After all, Gnosticism has a concept of I'm sure I'm going to say it wrong, the Salvador Salvatus, where each one of us is Christ lost in the world, and all we need to do is wake up to our own Christ realization, or Buddha realization, or whatever, Moses realization. When we wake up to that, then we can begin restoring the universe alongside with God or gods or whatever you believe in. So that definitely breaks away from Christianity or traditional Christianity in that way. Except, of course, if you feel Satan's running the show, as the Bible says. Paul calls him the god of this world. The Gospel of Mark says Satan rules every. If you feel that, yes, Satan is kind of, or this evil things or lesser things are sort of controlling our society and so forth, then yeah, you could agree.
Yeah, well, sometimes when I look at, either our society as being run Christ-like or Satan-like, I envision the pentagram. The Christ-like society is the upright, ascendant society, and then we're operating with the inverted pentagram. I mean, it's obvious in that we are operating in a material world. We're all this earthly passions are kind of ruling the world, where people aren't, they're not pursuing to pure thyself and to be Christ-like.
Right.
They're doing the exact opposite.
Any religion is going to tell you, look, you're spending too much time in the material world. You're too much into your ego. Get up, wake up, and do something more worthwhile. That goes with any religion. That's nothing. That's really nothing radical, even from the ancient times with the Stoics and the Pythagoreans. So again, the Gnostics differed because they really saw the world as a completely alien construct, and some said, well, this world might be bad or evil, but that's okay. It'll just go back to its own source, and we'll start the cycle again. Some said, no, it has to be destroyed, and our divine spark simply has to rise us up to it. And that's a very radical thing for Westerners to really believe or swallow, but it was attractive to secret societies who were trying to break the yoke of governments and churches. It's attractive to artists who are always trying to break out of the shell and find new realms where they can find ideas and express themselves, and so forth.
Do you think secret societies are ruling the world, like the Freemasons and the Knights Templar or any of those groups?
No, personally, I would say no. I think the human condition is always where the elite and the establishment are sort of going to run together, and it's not that they're secret, it's more that they're elitists, and especially today. And these societies, these brotherhoods, these priesthoods will begin to control the world. But sometimes it's almost like I like the Gnostic mythology because it simply says the archons, those are the ones who rule this world, these spiritual entities, they're pretty much ignorant of what they're doing. They think that they're just doing their job, or that they're doing what is necessary. But in the end, they're botching things up. I mean, it's kind of like looking at a bureaucracy or corporation with all these different parts: the CEO, the presidents, the workers. Everybody's sort of lost like little ants, and everybody assumes that they're part of this organism that works, but this organism in itself turns into one gigantic virus that starts eating eating away at the world, at what is good. They blind us. They keep us down. And I think that's what happens. It's the old road of hell is paved with good intentions. I think that's what happens eventually.
Yeah, and I want to play kind of devil's advocate there, because what I'm seeing now is almost like it's a 50-50 world. Because if you look at the information that's available out there right now to anyone to get educated, whether that be on the food they put in their body or getting educated about Gnosticism and science, and there's a lot of information out there, and you either could choose to take the path of ignorance and just whatever my teachers tell me or my preachers and so forth, or you could, take the path of know thyself and get educated and gain knowledge and become a Gnostic. It seems like we have like a dual society that's it's open, where you get to choose the poison fruit or the golden apple.
Exactly. And of course, knowledge is a very dangerous thing, and the task of the archons, the rulers of this world, the powers of the principality, is don't stir anything up. Keep everything status quo. Let everything just sort of evolve on its own in this sort of collective migration to the future. And again, this thing, what I said about binary code, there are always those who stand up and say, wait, maybe there's another way. Maybe there's a way that might be different. Maybe we need to look deeper inside of ourselves, or deeper into higher forms of consciousness. And these people, these groups, well, they don't do very well in the end, because after all, the collective has to crush them. The virus needs to grow, and you can say it's either good versus evil. I like to simply say it's information versus the material. It's either consciousness versus unconsciousness. It's being awake or just being asleep on this ship.
That's one of my questions that I have for you. How have you used, Gnosis in your life to be awake or to function as Miguel O'Connor?
I must say it hasn't gone very well, because here, let me put it this way. This might be a little verbose, but I'm going to quote a writer who I really like named Christopher Knowles, and he's very friendly to the Gnostics and a lot of the occult and the esoteric movements out there. But he wrote, "The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it saddles you with a burden you can never escape. So choose very carefully where you decide to start digging and what dragons you choose to slay. Prepare to be taken places you never wanted to go. Gnosis isn't always a flower. Sometimes it's a sword, maybe more often than not." And I like that quote because we all assume in this society that once we wake up, once our consciousness expand, that everything's going to be hunky-dory. Yet somehow when we watch the stories of whether it's Siddhartha, going out and finding for the first time that there are people that are dying and suffering, or Jesus coming back, going into the desert, or Paul of Tarsus falling from his horse and seeing the great light, or let's say Neo taking the red pill, we find out that when these heroes, these characters, these mythic beings that are really ourselves find the truth, it really messes up with the world. It's almost like the world itself will not forgive you for waking up. And whether it's going to try and crush you or simply test you to see how authentic you are, it doesn't matter, because when you have Gnosis, it's the beginning of a very hard quest, and that's the way it is in the story. So I think anybody who experiences any sort of enlightenment will find themselves challenged, will find that everything they knew was false, and everything that they find out might become false, and that they got to go farther. The Gnostic narrative always says, there's probably no ending. There's layers of truth and falsehoods that you have to get through, and it's a quest that might not ever end. You just got to keep going through your lifetimes and existences and keep going at it. So it's very hard. I mean, I often wish I'd just never found out. Ignorance is bliss. I wish I could just be some nice little New Ager with my crystals and say, well, the world is fine and everything's great, and all I have to do is sit around and meditate and give good intentions. But unfortunately, that's not the way. Again, it's not the way it goes with the stories. I mean, we expect when James Bond gets closer to the truth or to his mission, that's when, they were going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at him. That's when the girl's going to betray him. That's when his friend is going to betray him. That's when the villains are going to put him in these almost unescapable traps. So it's hard. It's serious, but it's fun.
No, that's incredible. I love the quote that you quoted and how you explain that, because I believe that to be true, and there's several Gnostics and ancient Gnostics that have died torturous endings to their lives, in this material world. And that's actually one of the reasons I chose Gnostic Warrior for my mission and my website and my radio shows, because I feel that we have to be somewhat of a Gnostic warrior to succeed in this life, and you gotta be able to operate in the material realm and fight with these non-Gnostics, and we got to make money, in order to fund our Gnostic pursuits, and that's the tough part. So, I understand, and there's no funding out there for us Gnostics, Miguel. No billion-dollar funds.
Well, unfortunately, not covered anything, which tells you of my meager existence, especially when it comes to financially. But again, you can look at the past, and it's not like, again, the great ones came before us. You look at Philip K. Dick, who some see as the great Gnostic visionary. his work didn't become successful until after he died. Blade Runner came after he died. You look at William Blake, he died a poor man, then later his work became successful. Obviously the ancient Gnostics, even the ones that came from, rich families and so forth, they went out like Buddha or Jesus. They went out to sort of find these pearls of great prices in the world. So it's and again, Gnosticism is sort of the minority of all the occult minority religions. It's always going to be in the background, but it's never going to, as you would say, it's never going to be this. It's never going to reach the masses. More in the background. I mean, we all know Philip K. Dick, we all know Carl Jung, Philip Pullman, and so forth, and those who use Gnostic ideas. But it's always going to be in the foreground because that's where most people can stand it.
Yeah, and it's usually, like you said, after they die, they come to the surface, and unfortunately they don't die with the money that they have after their death that their works produce. And hopefully, I look at what you're doing now. I mean, you have 4 books now yourself. You've been doing radio shows for how many years?
It's going to be 6 years I've had this podcast.
Wow, that's incredible. And you're only 43 years old, right, Miguel? Is that what you said?
44, and I'll be
44.
5 in April.
Gotcha. Maybe, the hard work will pay off, and like you said, I don't see it becoming popular, but I feel that there are ways that we can make money out there, and we'll talk about that later, on another show. I want to kind of focus on you today and, what Gnosticism means to you.
All right.
And as far as, what's it like being a Gnostic besides living a meager existence and writing books and not making barely any money and stuff like that? What else is it like being a Gnostic?
The life of an artist for most people.
The starving artist?
It was Stephen Heller who said every serious artist is already half a Gnostic. You're going to hit those ideas sooner or later, and you can see it. Robert Frost wrote a poem called The Demiurge, and scholars have noticed, he probably was into the Gnostics, but of course he kept it pretty secret. Herman Melville, it wasn't so much of a secret. He was into the Gnostics. I mean, Moby Dick is just a Gnostic gospel retold in a different form. So these things, as an artist and a Gnostic, you're probably going to be, or as an artist, you probably can relate to the plight of the Gnostics. So, wait, what was your question again? I'm overthinking all of it.
What it's like being a Gnostic, and I know where you're going with that. It's like we're attracted to other Gnostics out there, and you were talking about the plight of the starving artist.
Well,
what is it like being a Gnostic in this world?
Well, obviously, you're always going to be an outcast. I think any serious artist probably always feels he never belongs. He's not part of this world, and he thinks there has to be something better. I think, we all have gone through that where you say, God, if I had just been born in the 60s, or God, if I had just been born in the 20s, I'll have that feeling like I'm not where I need to be. I'm displaced from this reality. And that's what it feels to be the Gnostics. The Gnostics would say, well, yeah, but you're not going to find a place and time in this world. Your ancestral home is beyond this world, and you need to find the path, or you need to get reconnected with that. So it's always going to be the life of sort of an outcast. Of course, even the ancient Gnostics, the church fathers would rail because the Gnostics would go to church on Sundays, and they would walk out, and the church fathers would say, well, do you believe in this and this and this? And the Gnostics would simply nod their head and say, yeah, I believe whatever you say. And then as soon as they got that, they were there out doing their little, meditations and magic rituals on the weekdays, and back on Sundays they would go to church. That's kind of how I operate. I do, I go to mass on Sundays, and then the rest of the week I'm over here being a heretic, and then I'm back on mass on Sunday, talking to the priest. Hey, how's it going? So, life of an outcast. Even if you are holding a job, because the Gnostics were philosophers, they were artists, they paid their taxes, I'm sure they got haircuts and they looked like Roman, but even then you're still out of place inside.
Yeah, but the good news now is you're not going to get, there's no Inquisition, right? You're not going to get burned on a stake.
Well, there's always going to be an Inquisition. There's different ways of getting there's different ways where they're going to get crushed. Again, why would somebody who's considered one of the greatest poets of all times, William Blake, not even be recognized at all? Why was Carl Jung so vilified by so many people? There's definitely, again, there's different types of deaths in this world, and the world will try and kill you in different ways. The physical death might be the one you least care about, except you want to get as much information before your body is destroyed or dies in one way or another.
Is that part of evolving, do you feel?
Well, that's a good question. I don't see us evolving. I know a lot of the Gnostics would disagree on that, certainly modern Gnostics, but the Gnostics would say, and I think they would agree very much with the Hindus and the Greek Stoics, and that everything was in a cycle, because that's where the powers and principalities want to keep us. Everything is moving in a cycle, so everything stays the same, starts over, and everything is contained within this field of ignorance, or this field of business as usual. So I don't think I'm cynical, but I don't see humanity getting better, because as we get better in some ways, I mean, look at the internet. It's a great place for knowledge, but at the same time, intolerance in this world is just growing by leaps and bounds. It's this really weird dichotomy, and I feel that the internet itself, what it's doing, it's almost a tool of the demiurge, as I like, because I like to blame everything on the demiurge and the archons. It's fragmenting information. Our attention spans are being killed. So we have more information than ever. But we have also more bad information than ever. But we're finding ourselves not being able to process that information. As my friend said, Jim, he's more not cynical. I think he's realist. He said, I think humanity is going to be destroyed soon, and our graveyard and our tombstone won't be able to have more than 140 characters. More. So I wouldn't get to it. Modern times, I say we're just kind of in the same place as they were back then, but with the challenges are a little bit different.
No, I agree. That was great. What are some of your favorite Gnostic teachings?
Gnostic teaching. Well, obviously, central to Gnosticism is always going to be Gnosis. That's what, in the end, truly separates the Gnostics from other religions. And again, the early Christians did believe in Gnosis. The Gnostics thought, and Gnosis is ultimately...
It's a self-journey, correct.
Yeah, ultimately it's personal. I can't describe my Gnosis or tell you what my Gnosis is, whether you're a Gnosis. Ultimately, it's beyond words, beyond belief, and beyond any mundane reality. But
no, and I agree, Miguel, and I wanted to kind of, before you go into it more, because a lot of Gnosticism isn't really focusing on thyself and personal. A lot of the times, of course, when we're talking about it, we're talking about what old Gnosticism was, or the history, or what they said, or this and that, correct?
Right. I think, what they said, obviously, they were the ones who sort of pioneered the term or concept, and they did it to the best of their abilities. One thing we have to, when you read Gnostic Gospels, you have to understand that unlike other religions, they didn't have time to mature and refine their ideas. So sometimes it comes a little bit rough or strange or harsh. Anyway, Gnosis itself is, and that's pretty much universal throughout the ages. It's a sort of I won't call it direct knowledge, because again, all religions believe that they can have direct knowledge to other higher sources. It's more of as Elaine Pagel said, it's more of an intuition, an intimate understanding of yourself and the world and God. And when you understand yourself at the deepest level, you will find yourself knowing God, because you will find out that you two are connected. And when I use God, use whatever term you would like to use. But at the same time, it's also a knowledge of this world, not only what's true, but how false this world is. Everything we are, most of what we are is fake. We'd like to think that Mo and Miguel are these great individuals, and we like this and that, but most of what we are is just basically a construct of fate, of our culture, of what's happened to us in society. But there's a little shard that is true, and it's a little shard of divinity. Again, what did I call a shard of the infinite? And that's a part we have to get to know as we try to uncover all the different illusions of this sort of of the matrix. What is real and what isn't? What is worthy? What is good, and so forth. So that right there is what I love about Gnosticism and why I like to pursue Gnosis for myself.
Yeah, and that's what the teachings come from within, and what we're attracted to in our own past, and that's what people listening, I want them to focus on, is not just the teachings, but their own inner gnosis, and as Elaine Pagels has said, the intuition, which I totally agree. And each one of us, it's going to be different, and some of us might have similar pasts or things that we're attracted to, and that's why we might be attracted to their websites or radio shows or whatever that might be. But again, it's our own personal path of know thyself and knowledge.
Exactly. And another thing that's important is Gnosticism or Gnosis is not a do-it-yourself thing. There was one fundamentalist scholar, Ben Worthington. He's actually a very good scholar. He says, I call Gnosticism the gospel of narcissism. It's so individualistic to the point you're just so into yourself. And, of course, that's not the point of Gnosis. As Stephan Heller said, it's salvific knowledge intuitively arrived by the teachings of a hierophant of mysteries. These teachings have to be sparked. The Gnostic said there's a call beyond reality, the call of Sophia, as some of the Gnostic texts say, that awakens you. I mean, you might say that's Morpheus. That would be a great example. The teachings have to come from outside of you, from a master or some sort of higher divine being, or some sort of, I guess I don't want to say guru, but I'll say it. But having said that, this guru doesn't exactly have to be real. He could be your muse, your higher self who you envision. Again, the Gnostics might not have thought that Jesus was real, but they definitely were able to get outside of themselves, out of their egos, and listen to this sort of alternative view of the world and teachings. Carl Jung had his mute or guide, or as the ancients called him, a daemon. That's your higher self. The Romans called him the genius, your higher mind, the best part of you. He called him Philemon. Philip K. Dick also had called it Valis, and so forth. And so you see in history these Gnostics sort of making sure that it's not a trap of the ego, and they go into themselves and they end up being, again, complete narcissists, where the truth is within me and I know the truth, and whatever I think today is the truth, and all that. You got to get outside of yourself, and these hierophants, these mysterious muses, were the one way to do it.
So that essentially we're operating as almost like dual beings, where one could say that our lower self would be more Satan-like, and our higher self more Christ-like. And where the Satan self, I would, he's the passions, I want to go screw all these chicks, I want to party like it's 1999 kind of thing. Not necessarily all that, and he likes to eat hamburgers, and he's going to do that and listen to that. And when he has an urge to do something, he follows that urge. And the Christ-like says, hey, wait a second, I shouldn't look at that woman, and maybe I shouldn't have that extra drink, and I should maybe take this path, the higher road, the moral road.
Right.
Do you?
Yeah, to an extent. Again, this is not really original. I mean, obviously, all religions try to talk about self-constraint. I mean, we'd like to think that the pagans were these nature lovers having orgies. No, the pagans were also about control your emotions, keep it in your pants, think about things twice. The Gnostics, the term of the guardian angel, which Christianity uses today, that's actually a concept done by that originated with the Valentinian Gnostics. They believe that Jesus, or in their mythology, that Jesus was this great light that broke up into little sparks, and these little sparks of Jesus were watching over us, on our shoulder, telling us what to do. what the Gnostics did is they broke man into three levels. And I'm talking about, this is more of the again, Christian, classic Gnostics, that we had a spiritual level, we had a intellectual level, and we had a physical level. And in the mind, that's where the battle was, where the physical and the spiritual would meet. And we're always sort of struggling. And it wasn't good or bad. That's the function of these levels, was to sort of take over and rule. And we had to sort of, in our mind, separate the metaphysical from the physical. That's definitely one way to approach it. The Hermetics, the pagan Gnostics, they again believed in the daemon, or the nous, which is Greek for mind, that each of us had a mind that was beyond our reality, that was overlooking, was sort of looking at us and hoping that whatever was good and real in us would come and join us, or they would just interact forever.
And to interact and reach that higher mind, my understanding is you got to do the best to pure yourself, correct?
Well, yeah, of course, yes. You should always try to get, as they say, the chakras aligned. That might beg the question, well, how did the Gnostics do it? And that's a hard one, because, again, we only have we don't have that much of their literature that survived. They seem to have been doing what the Christians were doing, prayer, meditation, good works was certainly one thing that they were very strong into. And then they had these very theurgical rituals, which we cannot reconstruct, but it seems that they were calling on the name of God through magical rituals and baptisms and other things. And that, again, that's a hard. Oh, of course, the very important one is, and I'm going back to the concept of the artist. The Gnostics is Willis Barnstone, the great translator who's done Shakespeare, and he was part of the translation of the Gnostic Bible. He always said the Gnostics were first and foremost artists, and probably the greatest poets of our time. Because one of the best ways to really find out who our daemon is, or our higher self is, or to find out the truth about ourselves in the world, is through the expression of art and myth. That is one way, and maybe even the only way, to really get into ourselves, our true selves, and get out of our egoic self. I can't stress this enough, but express your art, express your inner flame. That's one way to find out the truth, or at the very least, like we've talked about, at least leave something better for those who are seeking the truth in other, future generations.
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring up the poets and the singing, because you look at the Druids, and I just wrote an article on my blog about the troubadours, who are actually the successors of the Druids, who were big poets and singers and so forth, and they went from town to town carrying news and mainly secret teachings also in their poems. And it's interesting that the Pope was actually he took on St. Francis's name. He's Pope Francis, and St. Francis was a troubadour before he became a member of the Catholic Church. So he essentially was a Druid and then became a member of the Catholic Church, and they exterminated the other people later. But anyways, that's another story. But it's interesting how I see a lot of those ties of the Druids entering the Catholic Church, and we see a lot of the hymns and the different Catholic chants and so forth, I believe, came from this. Do you feel that had happened, or?
Well, let me backtrack, but what you said is very interesting. There is, William B. Dunn, who's a great scholar of Manichaeanism, that was a form of Gnosticism. He proposes that the idea of hymns in churches originated with the Gnostics. They were the ones who believe in singing to nature and all that. And again, bringing up Willis Barnstone and other scholars, even Joseph Campbell, they contended that there's very good evidence that the troubadours were influenced by the Gnosticism, because at that time you had the Cathars, you had sort of Kabbalists in France and other regions, and they were interacting. And this whole idea of the divine feminine and the divine male finding itself in rapture, again, divine reason, Jesus, divine wisdom, Sophia or Mary Magdalene, finding themselves in unification in order to heal the world and reach, the higher planes. That right there was, that right there came right out of the page of the Gnostics. So there is evidence that the troubadours themselves were very influenced by the Gnostics. Although, as for the Druids, that's not my area of expertise, so I can't say. But I am intrigued by your article.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, there's a connection there, and if you go back far enough, you'll see it. And it just seems like they got different names, from different groups. So what we see now when you study history is often you'll see a different word for the same group from a different interpretation. Maybe he was from a different country, or he got it from someone else. So we'll find 5 of the same names for the same group that just kind of morphed over history. So it's kind of interesting. And we'll talk more about the Druid Church. I have some articles I'll be writing in the future. And I feel in the 6th century, 7th century, the Celtic Druid Church had merged with the Roman Church, and of course that's who we have today.
But hybridity, religions cannot borrow, no matter how much they dislike it. It's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. And I see the cult of Isis and a lot of the Druid teachings and the troubadours. It was essentially the cult of Isis, and then of course that turned into the Virgin Mary.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with it. All religions do it. We do it in our culture. We borrow expressions from the French, or we borrow, terms from the music we hear. It's going to happen.
Exactly. And some people, they just think it's, an evil plot. They're all Satanists and so forth. And it's just evolved religion over the years, and you see Catholicism is actually, it's evolving as well.
Yeah, there is no pure religion, and when the religions admit it, they actually enrich their own lives. The Catholic Church, has done it. They admit certain things. Even, you look at something like Scientology. All Scientology is sort of a thelema redone, is basically, the ideas of Crowley that their founder, who's their founder? I'm already losing myself here.
I can't think of his name either.
L. Ron Hubbard used to hang out in one of the Crowley lodges, and he took a lot of their ideas and started his own religion. So there is no pure religion.
Gotcha. Crowley and Satanism, I'm not saying that he started the Satan Church or so forth. I believe that was LaVey, but are they Gnostics?
No, I would say that they are not. First, I like to say that you can't really say anybody's Gnostic. I don't even call myself a Gnostic. I don't really call myself a Catholic. I call myself a heretic, which comes from the Greek. The original term for heretic, or one of the original, in the original context, was those who make a choice away from the norm. That's what the heretics. When you see church fathers going, that's a heretic, they weren't being that derogatory as we think. They were simply saying, these guys have different ideas, and they need to, we need to convince them that our ideas are better. So the Gnostics were crushed and gone. They didn't leave anything behind except for some writings. So there's no continuation. So I don't like to call myself a Gnostic because I haven't had anything by a true Gnostic handed down to me. And even the stuff that I might have from my visionary Jesus or my muses or my guardian angels, that's still me in the end. That's still a sort of a fusion of me and these other mysteries from beyond. And so I would say Crowley obviously was friendly with the Gnostics. He'd already read some of their texts, and he incorporated what he knew into Thelema. The problem is that a lot of these people like Crowley and Blavatsky and so forth, they're pre-Nag Hammadi library times. So there's a lot that came out from the Nag Hammadi library that they didn't know about that really expanded our view of the Gnostics. So in a sense, he got it, but in a sense, he missed out, not his fault. It's when he was a man of his times and he had the literature available to him.
It was almost his own Gnostic trip.
Yeah, a lot of it would be his Gnostic trip, and he obviously was inspired by the sort of explorative daring that the Gnostics has, the sort of individualism, but leaning on these other great higher powers that you might say are fictional, you might say are from another world, but it doesn't matter. They still transform you. they make you into a better person, into a more aware human being, and yes, you will have to pay the price.
You don't call yourself a Gnostic, Miguel, but I'm going to use that word since we use words to describe people. No, I look up to you for what you've done in the community and the work you've put out there. So I appreciate it. And if you don't mind, I'm going to call you Miguel the Gnostic.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. What how many? So you've written 4 books. How does one become an author? You know, I've been for the past 15 years been wanting to write a book, and it just hasn't happened. And you've been successful as far as writing not just 1 but 4. How does one become an author?
Oh, it's like having Gnosis. It's a terrible but one journey. I would almost say I would try to talk anyone out of it, because my 4 books, although they've received great accolades and have been reviewed very favorably, and they have a following, they're not exactly paying the bills, but that's with most 99% of writers. Never, can't quit their day jobs. But I would say if the greatest quest you'll ever find out in the world is find out who you are, who you really are. And really one of the great ways you can do that, as well as help others, because ultimately if you're not helping others, you've pretty much, you're lost. You're going to fall into perdition, is through the expression of your art, through writing. And this is not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be grueling. The truth, again, we talk about that quote by Chris, the truth saddles you with a burden. Writing will saddle you with a burden. And you have to do it every day, and you have to sort of slog and go down into these fields, and you've got to keep going. Again, look at the past masters. And the price is never going to be, don't expect any great price. Again, think of William Blake or Philip K. Dick or many others. The price is that, the point is that you do it, and you do it so you reach an expanded place of who you are and what you are to the world, and how you can, again, I don't know, making a better world, but make it a more interesting world. I think that's what Neil Gaiman said. He wants to leave the world more interesting than when he found it. That's somebody who also uses Gnostic ideas. Yeah,
that's awesome, Miguel. I mean, you've not only done it once, but 4 times. You've went through that grueling process, so I commend you. And to me, I look at it, it's almost like a sign of immortality. When I'm researching, material for my articles and hopefully my future books or my little videos that I like to do, it's amazing some of the material I come across of these unknown authors, and sometimes these authors that were known after their deaths, writings that are sometimes 1,000, 2,000, 2,500 years old, and sometimes they're just a few hundred years old. And it's just amazing, that they're not really known, but they're sort of immortal by the work that they've created in the world. The magic that came from within, that spark that they were driven to create on the without. So it's awesome that you're doing that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and also don't expect ever to be satisfied with your writing. As they say, what is important is that you find your voice. And I don't know who was the writer who said it, but you have to write it takes 1 million words before you find your voice. That's a lot of writing.
Wow.
Or nonfiction. And once you find your voice, that's really all that matters. Your voice is your divine spark. That's what places you. That is your shard of infinity in this world. That's the most important thing you'll ever find. In your voice, the word of God, the logos, that is what you can spread to others. And how much you spread and how much success you have it's really not that important. It's who you touch. I always like to say in my more sober moments when I'm not struggling with myself and my ego, it's like, well, if I affect one person, if I wake up one person, that I've done the job. That's it. I needed to do.
Yeah, and you definitely have done that, and probably more than you even know, Miguel, with your books and your work and your radio shows. Unfortunately, we live in a world of the internet where things are a little bit faceless and sometimes non-human. The contact is nil sometimes, but you're creating bodies of work that are being seen by thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and a lot of them you'll never know, and they'll never even comment. But they're there, and you're touching these people. So just keep it up, brother.
Like, do the
Yeah, definitely. And I have a couple more questions before we end. You got a couple more minutes, Miguel?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Okay. What are some of the best books that you've read personally on Gnosticism that you would recommend, and why?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Oh, God. Yeah, it's like somebody asking you what's your favorite song or something. Most people struggle, and if you ask them tomorrow, they'll change their mind. On Gnosticism, for me, the books that really awoke me was Philip K. Dick's Valis, even though it's a fiction work, and The Divine Invasion. That's his work on the Kabbalah and mystic Judaism. I really like Hans Jonas, The Gnostic Religion, even though it's dated because he wrote it before the Nag Hammadi Library. He really captures the essence of what was going on in the world during the Gnostic period, the Roman times. And I've always found it intriguing because it's when you look at the days of the Romans, this time of great religion and inclusion and the rumors of wars and the elite, controlling things and the materialism and the crazy. It's very similar to our day. So I like his book, and he really gets the sort of dark, brooding, yet compassionate side of the Gnostics.
When was that written? Do you know?
Oh boy, I can't think of it. At the top of my mind. I can't think of it. I think it was before World War II.
Okay, gotcha.
Thereabouts. God, see, I've read so many books on the Gnostics. I couldn't even tell you. I mean, Elaine Page.
Yeah, I could imagine you have quite the library.
Yeah. God, I can't even think right now. The latest book, I like David Brakke, Brakke, Gnostic Mythology. That's a very good book because it sort of incorporates all the ideas and comes with a sensible view of what the Gnostics were like. More broader books. Oh, I'm going to kill myself because I know I'm like imagining books. Say,
you mentioned Elaine Pagels. Would she be more of the Christianity Gnostic side of it?
Yeah, to be honest, that's what's interesting is I think Pagels has become more outdated too, even more, because she went in with some great views that the Gnostics were these sort of egalitarian feminists, and then she sort of got criticized for that, and people said, well, the Gnostics, no, they were just as intolerant as the ancient pagans or Christians or Jews. Now it's sort of turning around. And like the works of April DeConnick, her book, The 13th Apostle, is very good on the Gospel of Judas. Now it's coming around, and scholars are saying, the Gnostics were very advanced, their views of women and people. In fact, so advanced that we're still behind some of their ideas. And I think people forget that Christianity was advanced. As a scholar was telling me the other day, when St. Paul says, respect your wives, that was unheard of in ancient times. In fact, it's still unheard of today for somebody to say that one must respect the woman in the household and treat her well. These were times when women were just cattle, and they've been that way for hundreds of years. So anyway, I'm getting a little sidetracked. But The 13th Apostle is a very good book. Andrew Philip Smith's The Gnostics is a very good book. There's just a lot of them out there. If anybody wants to send me an email, I'll think of a list. And plus, again, there's different approaches. Do you want the historical? Do you want the artistic? Do you want the esoteric? Do you want the more political view on the Gnostics? So that's why it's hard for me to say.
Yeah, no, I agree, Miguel, and I would say you're one of the foremost authorities out there, not only with your book, The Voices of Gnosticism, but with all the interviews that you've done with the authorities out there in this field, that you're one of the experts. So definitely check out Miguel's website and send him an email if you're looking for books, and pick up his book, The Voices of Gnosticism, as well. And I got a couple more questions to end the show, and these are more on the conspiracy side, because I think, like yourself, you're attracted to somewhat of the conspiracy side of the world, because I believe we live in a conspiracy from birth, and we kind of work our way through the world as we go. But why do you think we like conspiracies as far as humans go?
As humans, we like mysteries from the ancient times. There were great romances and mysteries. Oedipus Rex. What's going to happen? We want to, within ourselves on an instinct level, we want to know the truth, even though some would rather turn on the TV or go on Facebook. We really want to know what's behind everything. And there's always going to be these sort of archons, this collective group that sort of falls into himself and grabs onto the material and becomes elitist that are going to try to control us. That's never going to change. So, and also we like, it's just more interesting. There's a study. Why do people like apocalypses, end of the world scenarios? It's similar. We want something that's more interesting than sitting in a cubicle all day. We want to know that at least our ideas of a different world or, different human beings or entities are true. We've confirmed them. So that's why we like conspiracies.
So we like to, it's almost, there's different things happening. We like the almost fear aspect. I sometimes label it fear porn or conspiracy porn, where we kind of got to get our dose of it. And then we also look at things, some are, of course, we don't look at because they're just hideous, but some we want to decipher and see if it is truth, because there sometimes can be truth found in these conspiracies.
Right, of course. There definitely are. I mean, it's like in the Matrix when Morpheus tells Neo, there's something wrong with this world and you've known it all along, or you know it, and it's driving you mad like a splinter in your mind. There's part of us that's always nagging, and through the corner of our eye, we know that there's somebody's pulling the strings. We know that there's these beings or people that are manipulating us and controlling us, and we really want to find out. We just have to turn off the TV and read a few more books. And entities, there's more entities and more, it's just not going to end.
And so this, again, would be like, who is the Illuminati, the Archons? This would be that group, the elite, that people would call the Illuminati. Is there an Illuminati?
No, I mean, historically, the Illuminati kind of came and went in in the 18th century in Bavaria. There were these sort of intellectual people who hated the church, they hated government, they hated secret societies. They used a secret society that wanted to destroy secret societies. I know Thomas Jefferson was kind of positive about them in his letters, but they kind of came and went. But sometimes, the myth comes alive. It becomes real. I don't know if archons are real. I don't know if the Illuminati are real, but for some reason they are influencing my life in one way or another. So this or not might not be the question you need to ask. There's a quote that I love. I think it's Thomas Pynchon that says, if they can get you to ask the wrong questions, then they don't have to worry about the answers. And that's what this society is. We're asking the wrong questions. We've always been asking the wrong questions. And the Gnostics were one of the few, I feel, were asking the right questions. And, well, they had to go.
Definitely. All right, let's, I'll finish off with where do you see Gnosticism heading in the future? You had mentioned Elaine Pagels and some of her works, that are good, but becoming a little bit outdated because there's more information coming to the scene. Where do you see it heading in the future?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we have to remember the first translation of the Nag Hammadi Library came out in 1979. So people have been studying, the Hindu texts and the Bible for thousands of years. So there's still there's still a lot of insights and discoveries that could happen. I mean, the Gospel of Judas, no matter what people tell you, they're still translating it. There's still words and passages and things that are being reconstructed. So it is very exciting. I don't know where it's going to go in a historical way. Oh, like, for example, here's something that's very exciting. And they've found this out with Neoplatonist texts. But you have these texts where you have these teacher and this student talking, and they're talking about this and that and the nature of existence. Scholars are finding out that these are actually coded rituals to achieve a higher mystical state of mind. And this is something new, and it's very exciting because we're like, well, it seemed like it's a dialogue, but it's actually hidden ritual that anybody can take and anybody can perform. So it would be very interesting to find out what these rituals might be like.
Definitely. It's exciting to see where it's going in the future. I want to continue networking with you, Miguel. And again, Miguel Connor, his website, if you'd like to visit it, it's The Above God.
The God Above God.
The God Above God, .com. And then aeonbyte.gnosticradio.com. And then you also have a Twitter. Do you use Twitter at all?
Yeah, it's just Aeon, AEON, Byte. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just keep it simple there. And again, he has 4 books you could check out. The Voices of Gnosticism, where he interviews different authors on the field of Gnostics, Stargazer, Heretic, and The Executioner's Daughter. So definitely check out Miguel Connor. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. It was great meeting you.
Likewise, and thank you very much for having me on.
Definitely, and I will get you a copy of this to you as quick as I can, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Fathers and children, creatures young and grown, called by mighty drumming of sacred hooks on stone. The sound of spirit horses dancing on a storm. Mercy for the people. Old ways